Welcome to the Director's Cut, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. I am Tracy Hyter Suffern. I'm the Executive Director of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. So the Director's Cut is something brand new that we're doing, and I'm so happy to introduce it to you this time with the person who is my very first guest. The Director's Cut is going to be a series of occasional conversations, which means it's not going to happen every month. It's just going to happen when I feel like it, or when I'm inspired, or when I meet someone wonderful who I think you need to know. All of our guests will be people who are coming at jazz in a way that is not necessarily the usual way, or at least the way that we've been taught is the usual way. One of the things I like to say about the museum and about jazz is that we show up in the most unexpected places. And this is certainly an unexpected place. One of the things that I have been intent on when I joined the museum about 4 years ago is helping introduce jazz to people who think they don't know anything about jazz, or think they don't like jazz, or think that jazz is a particular and rigid thing. I like to meet people at as many entry points as we can all think of, so that they can understand they do know about jazz, they do love jazz, they just don't know it yet. And we're happy to grab them by the hand and bring them along on an unexpected journey. Today, my very special guest, not just because he's the first, but because he is who he is. And we have waited for this for over a year. We have waited for this since the pandemic started and New York City shut down and the rest of the country shut down 17 or 18 or 19 months ago. Delbert Anderson is a member of the Navajo tribe. He is a professional trumpet performer. He is a jazz musician. He is an educator. He is a visionary. He was born in Shiprock, New Mexico, and discovered his interest in music, playing drums and singing for the church. Delbert is known for creating the Delbert Anderson Trio, DAT, and being a developer of music education programs and community projects. He's been called a visionary who bridges cultural traditions, which is right up my alley. He delivers with an urgency and passion that captivates, and an important voice for his community and his generation of artists. He now lives in Farmington, New Mexico. And by the way, New Mexico is one of my favorite places on earth. He's an active performer, composer, educator, and he puts Navajo culture through melodies inspired by ancient songs and traditions, while fusing them with modern jazz and funk. I could not be happier right now. Delbert, welcome.
Hello, Tracy. Thanks for having me. This is very amazing.
It's amazing to have you here. Tell us, talk to us. Tell us what it is you're doing. Tell us what we want to know about you, but we don't know that we want to know it yet.
Okay, yeah. I was brought up, through the church, singing, playing drums, like you said. But I think what made me choose the trumpet was a trombone player came to my elementary school, and the whole time everyone was using music, and he had a music stand with the sheet music there. And at the very end, he turned his stand around, and everyone was in shock because they were like, where's the music going to come from? And he just started soloing, and the band was playing. And I guess he was, my guess is he was probably playing some standard, and he was just improvising. But he told us that, music doesn't always come from the sheet. And he said, this is music coming directly from my soul, my heart. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so the next day I tried to play trombone, but I wasn't able to make a note on it. So they told me to go to trumpet, and I made like two sounds or something. And they were like, I think you're a trumpet player. So the first thing I did was I took my trumpet home, and I found like this chair, right? I put just a piece of paper there. It didn't have music. It was just a blank sheet of paper, construction paper. and I put it on the chair, and then I turned the chair around and I just started to try and play whatever. So I was just trying to imitate the trombone player, but that's what really, touched me and grabbed me and pulled me into music. And, I would never forget that experience because, every time I play that little scene always pops up in my head, and it's amazing how that's been the drive of everything. It seems like, of course, now that I do have a family, I have a wife and 5 children, and I've been self-supported on yeah, self-supported on music since 2013,
Wow.
and till this day that little scene comes up, but the meaning and what's been my sort of took place of that little experience that I had with the trombone player. It seems like family kind of took place of that now. So every time I'm doing something, I always get this visual of my entire family, like kind of all together right before I play. So it's amazing to see that transformation. And I when we do workshops, we're always asked like, "What is jazz?" or "What's the meaning of jazz?" And just based on my personal experiences and knowing a little bit of the history of jazz, I tend to look at it as it's transformative. It's more of a sort of a life experience. It's an evolution process. I kind of feel that's what it means. It makes more sense to me in terms of that, because I wasn't the same person when I started doing jazz. Actually, I'm different now. The experiences that jazz let me through, it changed me, and so I kind of look at jazz as like a um, evolution process or transformative process. And of course, when you look sort of into history, that's exactly what was happening too during those times of self-expression and letting all the moans and cries out, but turning it into something totally beautiful. That's what jazz did for me. I was just a human being, a very young person, and along the way, I've met my wife, and then now we have children. Now I'm a family man, and so
You're all
it's
grown up. Now you're a grown up.
yeah, yeah. It's really amazing that and I didn't start off playing jazz right away. I believe in like mid schools when I actually first went into a jazz band. But like I said, that trombone player of him not using music, that's when I first found out that jazz music had solo sections. And when when the teacher asks, "Does anyone want a solo?" I would always raise my hand. And I remember my teacher the first day, the first jazz piece I played was called Rockin' Lobster, and it had a this little solo section. And she told me, she goes, my teacher, she said, don't play what's on the music, just play something that you're feeling. And she didn't care if it didn't sound good or whatever. She was like, just play. And so that's what I did. I grabbed my stand and I turned it around and I
That's
started
great.
go. And and it was a little better, but that was my first time. I was the only one who would do it. Everyone was too scared to play. And after that, I think from ninth on till I graduated high school, I was playing with the our community jazz band, and so I learned a lot pretty early on, and God was able to get sort of a full ride scholarship for music at Eastern New Mexico University right after that, and they immediately put me in the jazz program, and because I was already soloing when I came in as a freshman, they decided to also put me on the faculty combo. So I was, I was just doing a lot of the jazz stuff when I went to school, and recruitment programs, everything. I was on all of those with the faculty, and so I had a really good support system while going through jazz. And the one of the last things my jazz teacher told me was he's like, okay, now you know how to improvise. You get the idea. You get the idea. He's like, now you got to apply it to your life. And I always thought what that meant. And and I started looking at it literally what improvisation was, and it's planning. It's kind of like in ways it's getting prepared, but getting prepared for something you don't really know what's going to happen. Um, so I started, studying up on a lot of like family stuff because I have a big family. One thing was I knew that my music career was getting a lot more busy and busy, and that kind of takes me away from the family at times when we go on tours and stuff. And so the first thing I reached out to was like a family therapist, someone who kind of knew music a little bit or knew about sort of the music career life, music industry, and was kind of going about of like, I want to do this right. I want to keep my family intact while I'm doing all of this stuff. So what's the best way to approach this? And they had so many amazing things that I had just never thought about. And, that was just kind of one of those getting prepared for kind of anything kind of deal. And, the biggest thing was, he told me that your family has to trust you and they have to be able
Mhm.
to trust the music. And I never really thought of that. My family trusting the music, it doesn't really make sense. But now when I go out, what they must feel is support from what I'm doing. So going out and getting your gig money and being able to bring that gig money back to your family and support them with that, that was one way to build like big trust. And now when I'm going somewhere, it's like the whole family has my backing. Like they're very happy that I'm going and playing, and it means a lot when you have that backing of and support of family. And so that's why I was kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, because it really it's what it is. that's
Mhm.
that's kind of what happens. And yeah, so I think jazz is just that all fits in within the description of jazz. I believe it's all growing, and it's always improvising and
All
finding a way through
improvisational,
life.
right? It's all
Mhm.
like catching up with yourself and being one step ahead of yourself. You've said so many things that I wanted to touch on. So if I want to bring you back to two or three things, some of them serious, some of them fun, so all in between. One of the things you said that really struck me is what happens in a young person's life when they're introduced to the arts, introduced to music, in this case music in particular, in a specific way, and you have supporting you a music teacher who believes in what they do and who believes in the learning process and believes in different ways of bringing a student along. One of the favorite stories I like to tell about myself, and anybody who's ever talked to me has heard this story a million times. I am so deeply grateful to two music teachers I had, one when I was 12 and one when I was 13. And the most unexpected lesson, that life lesson that I took from my early music training, was from that music teacher who realized that we were all I played stand-up bass, right, growing up. And the whole bass section was all girls, right? And we were all girls who knew each other. We were all from the same neighborhood. And when it came to playing the bass, we were all really, really shy about it. So we played really soft because it's a big, heavy instrument, very easy to take over the orchestra. And there was one day where the music teacher, her name was Ms. Olson. She got married and she became Ms. Marin. So anybody listening to this will recognize her both ways. She stopped class one day and she said, "I don't care if you make a mistake. What I care about is when you make a mistake, I want them to hear it in the very last row in the balcony. Own your instrument." And I hear that. I hear a version of that. And what you're saying about your teacher who really immersed you in improvisation.
Oh yeah, totally. There are two teachers as well that I even to this day I haven't found any teachers that um I don't want to say that are equal to them or anything, but have been super supportive. My she was my elementary teacher all the way up to high school. Her name was Janet Isham, and she's the one that actually got me into like the serious study of music. I was always last chair in the trumpet section until seventh grade. Seventh grade, she finally brought me out, and uh, she told me to come to rehearsal early one day, and so I went, and she was like, "Can you play this section here?" And it was a very easy section. And so I started to play it, and she said, "That's perfect." She's like, "Now I need you to play what you just did for the entire band class. Are you okay with that?" And I said, "Yes, that's fine." And she put me in front of the band class, and I played that little line, and she said, "You guys, this is how you need to play this music. This is what's called perfect. This is what it is." And she told me to, go sit back down. But that was all I really needed. That little support, or that little faith that she had in me, and the way she brought me out in the front and really put a lot of light on me and said, "You're doing something right. This is good. This is good. Keep continuing it." After that, I held the first chair all the way out until I graduated. It was amazing how just that little push was enough
Mhm.
to keep me interested. And I always look back to that time because I was playing, I wasn't, practicing every day, that kind of thing, but just that little push when someone really gave me the opportunity or something, that's when I realized, like, oh man, I should be like, this is serious stuff. And so I went back home and I started practicing and practicing, and I had that mindset of that, oh, I was the best because my teacher called me the best. And after that, I started, getting like first chair and everything like that.
Mhm.
And even in jazz band and the community jazz band, I started getting, I was put into second trumpet because it was the soloist of the group. And all these things started to happen after that. And so I really look back at that inspiration, and like I said, I don't really see any band directors doing that anymore because there's time constraints and all these things they have to worry about now. But I was happy that the teacher took some time out that to work with me like that. And the other teacher, his name is Christopher Beatty, who was my jazz teacher in college. Um, Everything that I did in the music, he never said anything about it. He just really left it open. When I had ideas, because I even tried to tell him, like, if it's really my solo, he's like, "Do you mind if I try to like sing a little bit while I play, or like put out some little melodies?" And he was like, "That's up to you, man." He's like, "You can if you want." And he's like, "But later on, we're gonna find out like if what you're playing makes sense." So there was that kind of, he let me go loose for a while. He let me
Mhm.
experiment and really get to go out there and do some really odd types of playing and weird things like that. But on the very last, sort of the last lessons I had with me, he asked me a really serious question. He's like, "Do you know what sounds good? Do you know what sounds bad?" He's like, "Because there is a good and a bad that people associate with." He's like, "Do you know where you stand on those two?" And I told him, I was like, "I probably stand like right here." And he was like, "Good. So you have a really good knowledge of what sounds good, what sounds bad." And he still told me, like, not, he's like, he never said, "Don't play this, don't play that, don't play that." He never ever said that. But he really gave me the, I don't know how I developed that, the set of ears that I have now, but when he did mention like, the bad playing, or I guess some people associate it with wrong playing,
Mhm.
he asked if I heard that, and I said, "Yeah, I know what I know what that sounds
I know the
like."
difference.
Yeah, and so I mean, but still, even then, he never said don't go there, or don't play those notes or whatever. But he left it completely open, and to this day, It's like the more knowledge you receive, the more experience you have, it really goes back to, there really is no the wrong way to play this music. If it's true, if it's genuine, if it's honest, I think for me that's kind of what supersedes a lot of things. And I'm well versed enough, when you look at like music business or whatever, or things do have to sound good, things do have to sound right in order for people to kind of bob their head, that kind of thing. But still, like the art form itself, the expression is all honest. So and I always tend to put that at the forefront of the playing, whatever it is in whatever situation.
I love what you're pointing to, what you're elevating, is one of the things that I see as so important. What those two teachers, what those two instructors did for you is they changed your self-talk, right? They helped you change the messages that you were telling yourself, about your playing, about what's good, about what's bad, and your vision about what you wanted to do. One of the things that leads me to that I want to talk to you about, I promised you that I'd ask you some fun questions, but some of the things you're talking about have already brought me there. In the beginning, when you very first started talking, one of the thoughts that came to me was inspired by something you said. What do you see when you play, Delbert? What do you see?
All right. Well, this is, if you can imagine really quick. Right before I play, I said two things. One was it used to be the trombone guy, and I still see that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other thing was like I see this like picture of my entire family with me in it, right before I play. I think the bigger the performance is, if it's sort of a, like, I don't know, big festival in front of a lot of people, my family tends to flash like
Okay.
before I start playing. But if I'm doing like a workshop with like students and whatever it might be, a master class, I always get that flash of the trombone player. That and But those are two things that really like pop up in my mind, and until I play that instrument, it kind of like just sort of fades away, and I kind of start focusing in on what I'm doing finally playing. But yeah, that's really what comes up. There's been some really beautiful places that we perform. One of those places was Sitka, Alaska, and it was evening time. The ocean was just there. The sunset was right. The weather was great. And, the drummer looked over at me and he's like, man, he's like, what do you, what do you think of all this? And I was just looking, and just in awe of all the beauty. And I looked at him and it was just like, wow. I was like, I had no idea I'd be here for, music, or music brought us here to this beautiful sunset or this scenery. And, then right after that, I put the trumpet up and then bam, there it was, kind of like saw my flash of my family again, and then started playing. And so it's unbelievable where music has taken us. And, part of that, I believe, is like you were saying, this whole visionary that people have been saying. I've been called a lot of things, like even a community developer, but all I'm doing is just, like I said, just keeping honesty at the forefront, and trying to. We don't necessarily look for the next big thing or what was the next deal. Those things tend to just sort of come to us, and it just kind of comes out naturally. We have about 8 or 9 projects that we host, that the band is the primary base of all these projects, but we're able to kind of fit into those art mediums of like visual arts or theater, music, education. So we kind of developed a lot of these projects in those areas, so we could be accepted in those art mediums and those art forms. Yeah, it's all music's at the base of everything. It really is. And I think a lot of it has to do with my cultural, ties to the music. Um, at first, I did study standards. I did do all of, sort of the improvisation work with those, and kind of went into detail in jazz history, and did a lot of research in those areas. But something that I've never done was, when we were forming the band, we didn't want to just be a jazz combo. There's tons of those everywhere, and so we decided to kind of look in deeper into ourselves. What can we pull out that's true? That we can create with. And for me, it was my Diné background, or
I'm so
Navajo.
glad that's, please
Yeah.
talk more about that.
And we so the thing is, I grew up, my grandparents were traditional. My parents, they were kind of split, traditional and non-traditional. And recently I think both of them are sort of, they're more of a they culturally like appreciate it, but they don't participate in the traditional ceremonies and things like that. um so I'm kind of the same way as my parents. I do know the culture. I because my grandparents were traditional, they used to take me to some of the ceremonies and things a long time ago. But to this day, culturally, sort of on like the educational side of it, learning about the stories and everything. Those are things that I've had to do later on, because I honestly didn't really know any of them. I knew the very popular ones, but not very deeply. So what I did was, when we were creating the trio, I started to jump a lot more back into my culture and learning the ceremonial songs, learning
Uh-huh.
these stories, and just to get more well versed. And I came across these songs called Diné spinning songs. And Diné is just another way of saying Navajo. I think it's more of the preferred way of saying Navajo. So Diné mainly means like people, or they refer to it as like holy people, the Diné people. Well, I came across Diné spinning songs, and when I was doing research on it, it totally made sense. It totally locked into me and really touched me deeply, because the spinning songs were there to experiment with traditional, the traditional makeup, the music, but it was a way for people to tell new stories. So the Diné spinning songs, I thought, would be a perfect route to take with our music venture. Was because I'm like the composer of the group, and I guess in technically like the lead person of the trio. And so I took the liberty of saying, well, let's let's follow this path of these Diné spinning songs. And so what I was able to do was still utilize some of like the rhythms, some of the melodies of maybe some of the more popular spinning songs, but it was also a way to expand on that. Like I said, the Diné spinning songs were made specifically to expand the repertoire of Native American music, or Diné music in general. So it worked out perfectly. They're not ceremonial or sacred songs to where, we have that issue of
Mhm.
sharing something sacred. So it was just a perfect avenue that I found. And after talking with a lot of the elders around here, and on the Navajo reservation, they thought it was totally fine. And I think there's a lot of times where people tend to say like the Neh songs are sacred. You're not supposed to share any of them. Um, and some of them, like, there are sacred songs, there are ceremonial songs that can only be done at certain times, and at certain, when certain issues arrive or something like that. But every elder that I've spoken to, and this goes back to maybe three generations um, of people, the Diné people, the Diné elders, even the medicine men, were fairly open to sharing and being inviting. There was maybe one or two that had that mindset of no, we can't share anything. But I'm one of those that like to do the research up to what I know. So I only speak about or talk about what I've actually researched. And, musicologists can say, this is how the music sounded 23,000 years ago. And I'm like, how do you know that? Like, I don't know about that. But I do know 50 years, this is how it sounded. I do know that. But beyond that, I have no idea. But I like to just stick with what I've been able to find, because it's such a it gets hot sometimes, that topic of what did early Native American music sound like. And some people have documentation of early Native American music, but still they don't really know how that sounds like unless they had a recording or someone who says they know. But it's really hard because everything was more of sort of like that game telephone, where it's just passed on to generation
And it
next
evolves
generation.
as you go. Where can
Yeah.
we hear some of the influences, some of the influences in the music that you might describe as jazz, funk, soul? Where can we point our listeners to go hear some of what you're describing?
Well, if you're looking for like the more of the I guess foundation of what we've been creating, there's a really good it's a cassette tape, and you might have to go to a library, but I heard there's a lot of these around. It's a 1920 recording of it, and it's titled Navajo Spinning Songs.
Okay.
So if people want to really hear the real deal of where, how it was played at that time, around that time, that's a good resource to go. I'm pretty sure every library has that, or I think even they have it in digital now format. For us, you can go to ddatlive.com under the music subtitle, and all of our albums are there. I think Manitou, our first trio album, really touches a lot on those melodies and has a lot of inspiration from the Diné spinning songs.
I
You can
have to
also.
say, I just want to interrupt you quickly. When I very first learned about you, that was what I listened to. And I think I even told you this a year and a half ago. It was a spiritual experience for me. It was the reason I knew that we had to connect and we had to have a conversation about the bridging of cultures. And I wanted to make sure that people know who our audiences know who you are.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's amazing, and it was just different enough to really elevate our music careers also. And it wasn't because like I would there was some thought of we need to be different to kind of shine a little better. If we were a jazz combo, this would have never taken place. So
Okay.
there was that thought of, we do have to be unique in some way. And the cultural thing just made sense to me because, one, I didn't really know my own culture, and I thought it'd be fun to start digging and researching. And two, it worked so well. The more that I try and study Native American music, I think Smithsonian put out or had a little article in their magazine, and it said something like swinging with the Native American chants, and I get asked in there about they were like, how does Native American and jazz work? But and it was very simple because I believe early Native American music, our drum beat came from our heartbeat. Somewhere someone heard it, and because it has that bo boom, bo boom, bo boom, it has that beat pattern. But when you also listen to that beat pattern, it's also a swing beat. Doom cha, da doom cha, bo boom.
Mhm.
But boom, it's already deeply connected to jazz because it's in the heart already. So I kind of laugh a little bit about that sometimes, but we've been through a lot of different like histories and different things that the people just don't put those things together right away. But I like to say, our Native American drum that is beating is actually a swing beat. And um, even because that beat is swing, a lot of the melodies are sung in a swing manner. They have this, right? And so it's already in the form of swing. And maybe that's the reason why I was able to swing so easier than many of
So
the
easy
people.
and so fast. I am sad to say that we've come to the end of our time together, but we need to talk more about this Native American swing beat, this indigenous swing beat. You hear the same conversation around reggae music and around so many other kinds of music, that the inspiration or let's say the mimicry, which is not really the word I mean, but is of the
Mhm.
human heartbeat. I think this is a perfect place to end, because there needs to be a part two, and we need to pick up here. Delbert, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit and to chat with me. It was wonderful to hear you speak about your past and your present and the bridging of cultures. I want everybody listening to know, everybody watching to know that Delbert will be performing with us in the coming months. Go to jmih.org and see our events page to see when Delbert will be performing with us. It's something that you do not want to miss. Again, it's JMIH, Jazz Museum in Harlem, jmih.org, and go to our events page and watch for Delbert, who will be coming soon, who will be with us in the coming months, and to see our other events. Thank you so much, Delbert, for this opportunity. As I said when we opened, I've been waiting a year and a half for this and more, and I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you.